Hi, my name is Ronnie Allen Reel, and this is my Week 5 informative speech. Hi, my name is Ronnie, and today I'm going to talk about Linux and open source. So, Linux is a powerful, highly customizable open source operating system initially developed in 1991 by Linus Torvalds, built on top of the GNU core utilities. Um, Linux powers majority of the internet at 50% web server market share. Um, in the top 100,000 web servers. Linux is Unix-like, given that it shares virtually all the same core utilities and is interoperable with Unix. Some Unix examples would be like FreeBSD, um, Slackware, Gentoo. Linux is its own system, respectively, but is interoperable with those. Linux is the operating system of choice for enthusiasts, professionals, and downright rebels, uh, and it can be used for a variety of capabilities depending on what flavor or distribution you use. And if it doesn't come ready to go with what you need, you can customize it to what you need. Linux is flagship open source software, of course built on top of the GNU core utilities, and it is a wonderful first impression to the power of open source, if you're not familiar with it. So what is Linux and open source? So Linux is the most popular ongoing open source project next to GNU. Linux specifically is not an entire operating system, but rather a operating system kernel that interfaces your hardware and your software and your user space to your bare metal physical pieces to your computer, built on top of the GNU core utilities. And so whenever people, and myself in this speech, refer to Linux, I'm actually referring to GNU/Linux, since they are respective of one another. Linux being open source means that anyone can take the Linux kernel and pare it down or build on top of it and expand it to fit their exact software needs at every level, for those hobbyists to mid-level enterprise and enterprise applications. Most references, I said that. So the GNU project is a open source project to develop free software in a variety of domains, typically used, early on was used to develop some tools used to build even more open source software like CMake as well as the GNU C compiler. And the GNU project is completely free to use, modify, and distribute. All source code is publicly available and accessible, and you can look at and try to extrapolate what it's doing and build on its source code. For this speech, I'll focus on the Linux desktop and not the GNU project, but Linux wouldn't be what it is without the GNU open source project, which has been running since the 80s, 10 years or so before Linux. And that is probably even longer running than Linux. Well, it is. So, why Linux? So Linux empowers its users to learn and grow as enthusiasts or professionals. People have even made a living by simply knowing Linux in and out. There's some certifications such as Linux Plus, and I believe it's called the LSIP certificate, which you can actually get a career in just knowing Linux and using it and playing with it. Linux has a vibrant and passionate community of developers and users worldwide who actively contribute to its development and improvement. Major companies support Linux and contribute resources to enhance its capabilities, such as Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, or Meta. So Linux fosters an open source sort of culture and of collaboration and knowledge sharing, resulting in continuous updates and innovations, and Linux is used by 85% of smartphones. Linux is the developer's choice operating system since it ships with all the utilities that you need to start building programs and software and shipping them and publishing them. And so from there, Linux is like a central spine of open source projects. And there's lots of, I mean, open source is everywhere, but no one talks about it. So if you use a website, if you use a web, you use Alexa, Siri, Amazon, if you use any type of technology, you are benefiting from open source software, um, and primarily, in my eyes, sets of libraries that people use to build their software, which are publicly available, and everyone, it's a given. You're building something, and someone else has written some code that you don't want to write, and you just import it in and you use it. So, Linux is highly configurable, and this is one of my other main points. So, whether you're a GUI master or keyboard wizard, there are environments to suit your needs. And for those configurations that aren't readily available, luckily in Linux everything is represented as a file. So, with some suit of patience and research, you can get the system to behave and act the way that you want it to, simply by editing a set of text files and referencing maybe some documentation. So a good example of that is a community online called Unix Porn on Reddit. They're simply a subreddit or a community that shares some of their builds on their computers, just showing their attractive setups and their specific workflows on their computers. And something that looks like that is like this. So this is sort of a tiling window manager, so everything is nice and neat and uniform. And this user uses it for everything. You can see they're editing, maybe writing some essays, they're reading books. They've got a book here. They can manage all of their files and play some videos as well as audio output. Write some markdown code, and browse the web, all in one space. This user over here has a very minimal setup in contrast to what we just looked at, where they've got a terminal and just kind of like an info wall with some utilities here on the left, some information about the time on the right, and maybe some launchers on the far right of that. And then this user here shared this nostalgic looking setup, and I really like this one because it looks like a Windows 98. Brings back some memories. That looks really nice and clean, and like they really spent a great deal of time setting up. So that's kind of some of the configuration possibilities that you can use with it, and that's why I like that. But let me go back here, and so let's see. In my opinion, Unix, that community is a perfect snapshot of what is possible in the user level, and at its core, unlike Windows or Mac OS, Linux can be tailored to your specific needs at the atomic level. You're not building on top of the operating system, you're building in the actual utility of it. So I have actually some examples and recommendations, and we'll go into those here. So due to the Linux open source nature, there are hundreds of flavors or distributions, distros for short. And my flavor of choice is Fedora Linux. I use it every day for schoolwork, development, and some of my home lab purposes, some experimenting. My first distro was Ubuntu Linux, and it is super easy to use. It's where a lot of people start. It was developed by Canonical. Ubuntu is the first step many take in the world of Linux. It's a derivative of Debian, which is one of the first greats. And many distros are based on Debian, Arch, and Fedora. But this is Ubuntu here, very simple, friendly. You can see they offer some enterprise solutions as well as community, and they empower developers to build reliable software. So this is the main website for Fedora, and this is a good next step maybe if you're past Ubuntu or there's some things in Ubuntu that you don't enjoy and you kind of want to be a bit more free. It's 100% free and open source, so at its core, just as it ships, it comes with all the utilities you need and fits the free software um, guidelines. Then you've got Linux Mint, and this is actually my choice that I recommend people start out with is Linux Mint because it's the most Windows-like. It doesn't ship with kind of an alien environment, and it's just a really nice to use operating system that comes with all of the utilities that you need to just use it, and that's what's really important is you just want to use it, and whatever gets a user to the point that they can just enjoy it and be productive. They're referred to as flavors or distributions since anyone can find one that ships with their preferred amount of setup and software. And for those of you coming from Mac OS, there's Elementary OS, which looks something like this. So it shares a UI, and again, that plays into the configuration. All of these are basically running the same software underneath the hood, but it's the user space, programs, and tools that tailor it to look and act a specific way. And if you're initially wanting to try it out, I recommend a VirtualBox. If I can spell it. VirtualBox is a virtual machine manager which allows you to download and install virtual machines of Linux on top of your existing computer without having to wipe anything. I use it here for Kali because I like Fedora since it's a bit more bleeding edge, but Kali is based on Debian, so it's a bit more archaic, some older set of software. But yeah, so I like it for penetration testing, and that's what Kali Linux is good for. Yeah, you can use VirtualBox, which is another piece of open source software, to just try it out without having to commit and maybe even do some development. It's powerful enough that you can actually use it inside to its full extent, and you're not limited. So I've got Fedora Linux on my computer here, and I also have Windows 11 as a dual boot, and I still play games. I want to play games, I go over to Windows. I want to do work, I go to Fedora. And I could very well spend hours configuring Linux to work with all my games, but I just want to play the games. I don't want to configure them. I just want to enjoy them. And I can and have spent countless hours trying to do so, and that's how I got to that opinion. And I'm looking at you, Arch, because yeah, that's a few hundred hours probably that I won't get back. But so in conclusion here, Linux offers a powerful, flexible, and secure alternative to proprietary software operating systems. Its open source nature, coupled with a dedicated community, ensures continuous improvement and a vast array of possibilities for users, whether you're a tech enthusiast, a developer, or someone seeking reliable and free operating system. It presents a compelling choice. I use it every day for learning and leisure, development of my open source project Acronym. Its extensibility and representation of true freedom has made me an advocate for life considerably since I first experimented with it a year ago. And for that, I will always be grateful towards the community and the open source community. My name is Ronnie, and thank you for listening to my informative speech on Linux and open source.